All right, today we are diving into something truly strange, one of the most bizarre phenomena in all of psychology. It's called Folie à deux, which literally means the madness of two. And we're about to find out how, under just the right circumstances, reality itself can become contagious.
I want you to really think about that for a second. That one person, you know who I'm talking about, the one you tell everything to, the one you trust, maybe even more than you trust yourself.
Now, what if that person, your person, started telling you that the world outside is evil, that it's dangerous, and the only way to survive is to just cut everyone else off, just the two of you, safe. It's us against the world, they say. How long before you'd start to wonder, maybe they're right?
And then, what if they told you that for one of you to truly be free, the other one had to die? Would you believe them then? Look, I know this sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, but what if I told you that our brains, our very minds, are wired in a way that makes this kind of shared reality not just possible, but sometimes inevitable?
Yeah, it's a wild thought. We all like to think of ourselves as these independent thinkers, right? Captains of our own ship. But the truth is, our reality is constantly being shaped by the people we're closest to. And when that closeness turns into total isolation, well, that's when the lines between me and you start to get really, really blurry. The medical term for this is shared psychosis, but honestly, the French came up with a name that's just so much better.
The key thing to understand here is that the delusion isn't just shared, it's transmitted. It's like a virus. One person's madness can literally, and I mean literally, infect someone else. So how on earth does that even happen? How does something so personal, so internal as a delusion, just jump from one mind to another?
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of this. We're going to break down how this actually works, because it's this fascinating and honestly kind of frightening mix of our own biology and psychology.
It all starts with our own wiring. You've probably heard of mirror neurons, right? They're the reason that when someone else yawns, you yawn. When they panic, your own heart starts to race. This is empathy, and it's a fundamental part of what makes us human. It's how we connect, how we form bonds. But that same beautiful gift of empathy, it has a dark side, a really dark side when you put it in the wrong environment.
So in pretty much every case of Folie à deux, you see these two distinct roles emerge. First, you've got the inducer. This is usually the more dominant personality, the one who is the original source of the delusion. Then you have the induced. This person is often more submissive, maybe more dependent, and they're the one who, well, they absorb the delusion. They adopt it as their own reality.
And this is where that closed system becomes so dangerous. The microphone analogy is just perfect. Think about it. With no outside voices, no one to say, hey, are you sure about that? The delusion just echoes back and forth between the two of them. The inducer says something crazy, the induced agrees, which then makes the inducer even more convinced they're right. And that cycle just spirals and spirals, getting louder and louder, until it completely shatters their connection to the real world.
Okay, so this all sounds theoretical, right? Let's make it real. To see just how devastating this can get, we have to look at one of the most famous and, frankly, one of the most tragic real-world examples of folie à deux. This is the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons, better known as the Silent Twins.
June and Jennifer. They were identical twins who, right from a young age, just rejected the outside world. They made a pact. They refused to speak to anyone but each other. And when they did speak, it was in this private, super fast language that only they could understand. In their room, they built this incredibly rich, sometimes violent, but also brilliant inner world. They wrote stories, novels, but their bond, it was not simple love. It was a war. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote comes directly from Jennifer's diary. Think about that. She is the long, dark shadow over my life. One of us must die. This wasn't a partnership. It was a brutal, life-or-death struggle for their own identities. And inside that closed system they had built for themselves, they were caught in an absolutely impossible trap.
It was what psychologists call a double bind, just an impossible situation. If you tried to separate them, they would become catatonic, just completely unresponsive. But when they were together, they would fight, often viciously. So their bond was everything to them, their only comfort, and also the source of their deepest pain. They were, for all intents and purposes, addicted to each other.
So after years of crime, they were sent to Broadmoor, a high-security psychiatric hospital. And in those 11 years locked away, they came to this chilling conclusion.
Their shared madness, their folie à deux, was so complete, their identities had become so merged that they believed, truly believed, that the only way for one of them to have a real life was for the other one to die. And Jennifer, who is always the slightly more dominant twin, told June, "I'm going to die. I've decided." And on the very day they were supposed to be released, on the bus leaving that hospital, Jennifer did exactly that. She rested her head on June's shoulder and died. Just like that. An autopsy found she had an acute inflammation of the heart, but there were no drugs, no poison, nothing. It was as if she had simply willed herself to death. And the very moment Jennifer died, June started speaking, normally, to everyone. She later said, "I'm free at last. Jennifer has given up her life for me." The folie à deux was finally broken. Now, okay, the story of the silent twins it's an extreme case, for sure. But the mechanism behind it, the thing that creates this shared madness, that is not confined to some rare psychiatric syndrome. It happens all around us, in forms you might even recognize. Think about it. Have you ever known a couple that gets completely wrapped up in their own world, convinced the neighbors are spying on them? Or what about a mother and daughter, where they both seem to have the same mysterious illness that no doctor can diagnose? It's the same pattern, just on a smaller scale. A cult leader and their very first follower. Business partners stuck in a toxic echo chamber. It's always the same. A dominant personality, a submissive one, isolation, and a shared, warped reality. And it really boils down to a simple formula. This is the key. Isolation plus obsession equals madness. When you take intense focus on one person or one idea and you completely cut off any outside perspective, you have just created the perfect petri dish for a shared delusion. So this all begs a really important question, right? How do we protect our own minds from this? How can you tell if a relationship you're in is healthy or if it's starting to warp your own sense of reality? We need a defense system. So let's build one. Okay, so here it is, your enmeshment defense. 3 simple rules to protect your reality. Rule number 1 is the third-party reality check. This is non-negotiable. You have to maintain reference points outside of that intense relationship. Remember the silent twins? They had no one. So if a friend or a partner ever says, "It's us against the world," that should be a massive red flag. You need other people in your life who can call you out and tell you when you're starting to lose the plot. Rule number 2, the autonomy audit. You gotta ask yourself this honestly. Can you function alone? When that person isn't around, do you feel a sense of freedom, or do you feel like you're completely falling apart? See, healthy love is all about interdependence. That's 2 whole, complete people who choose to stand next to each other. Toxic attachment, that's codependence. That's 2 broken people leaning on each other so hard that if one of them moves, they both come crashing down. And that brings us to rule number 3, the sacrifice trap. Just think back to Jennifer. She genuinely believed she had to die for June to live. In these toxic bonds, you'll almost always find one person who is constantly setting themselves on fire just to keep the other one warm. So let me be really clear. If a relationship requires you to destroy your career, your health, your friends, your very sense of self, that is not a relationship. It's a parasite. It's not loyalty. It's a slow suicide. When you really get down to it, the story of the silent twins, as tragic as it is a powerful lesson. Our minds are not designed to be a closed loop. They need fresh air. They need other voices, different perspectives, just to stay grounded. Because if you lock that door, you might just find that the person you're locked in there with isn't your friend. They're your shadow, a reflection of your own darkest impulses. So this madness of 2, it's a powerful, powerful force. But here's a final thought for you. What happens when it doesn't stop at 2? What happens when this contagious madness spreads like a virus? Through an entire town? A whole city? What happens when people start dancing until they die? Well, that's a story for another time.